Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 848B, and today's date is December 21st, 2015, and the title of the episode is U.S. Government is Getting Ready to Change Tactics in Syria, but Keeps the Main Goal, Assad Must Go. Let's get into the economic collapse, political, and geopolitical news. Now, out in Nigeria, we realize the United States and the other private Western Central Bank countries really wanted to get into many of these South African and African countries. And we know since there was an election in Nigeria and there was a new leader that was elected, the United States made a deal where they're accepting the U.S. troops. Now, Britain will be sending more troops to Nigeria to combat Boko Haram, which is completely made up, which is controlled by the United States government central bankers. It's the same thing we're seeing in Syria, in Iraq, in Yemen. It's the same MO, and basically what they're doing is they're pre-positioning troops in all of these countries, preparing and getting ready for the major war. Now, out in Germany, the Germans are getting very nervous. The refugee crisis is getting out of hand. And the Germans, they're scrambling to acquire weapons because they're saying with this spike of migrant-driven crime and rapes of German women and girls are increasing dramatically as more and more of these refugees come into the country. They are getting very nervous because they're seeing also an increase in stabbings, home invasions, robberies, burglaries. And they're saying, something, we need to protect our families. And they're going out and they're purchasing weapons. Now, the German authorities, they're going to great lengths to argue that, no, there's no problem here. You don't need to purchase a weapon for self-defense. This has nothing to do with mass migration into the country. But the people are saying, yes, we are seeing this because they're seeing a spike in violent crimes. And basically, there was a police report that was leaked which reveals that a record-breaking 38,000 asylum seekers were accused of committing crimes in 2014. And a new poll shows in Germany that 55% of Germans are pessimistic about the future, up from 31% in 2014 and 28% in 2013. The poll shows that 42% of these people are ages between 14 and 34 believe their future will be bleak. And they're saying that from all of this, their economy will not be able to be sustained here because 79% of them believe that the economy will deteriorate in 2016 due to the financial burdens created by the migration crisis. Now, what's very interesting about all this is that the migrant crisis is spread out throughout Europe. We understand the United States government central bankers had Turkey keep all of these refugees, and they didn't really come from Syria. A very small portion of it came from there, but a lot of it came from the other countries, because you have to remember the United States invaded Yemen, Syria, Lebanon, Iraq, and also Syria. And Turkey has been harboring all these refugees. And then the United States said, hey, let's release it into Europe and cause complete chaos and have Europe join us in the fight against the Islamic State to stop this refugee crisis. But they're also using the refugee crisis to basically show that, this is another reason why the economy cannot be sustained, because we cannot support all of these people. They're doing whatever they possibly can to protect the central banking system because they don't want to be blamed for what is happening. But this has been happening for a very long time. The debt has been building to the point where it cannot be sustained anymore. And they're trying to convince everyone that all these other problems is why the economy is all of a sudden falling apart, which we know is not true because we've been tracking it and we've seen absolutely no improvement in the economies whatsoever. They have only gotten worse. Now, India right now has given the green light to purchase several Russian S-400 air defense systems. Now, China has purchased the S-400. India is going to be the second country in the world to purchase the S-400. And Russia and India have very close military and political ties. India's first fully capable aircraft carrier was built in Russia, and a significant part of the Indian Air Force comprises of a lot of Russian-made aircraft. So we can see they're already preparing and getting ready and bringing in defensive weapons. All these countries and these leaders realize what's going on here. They understand the United States is spread around the world. Forces in many, many countries preparing and getting ready for this next war. They realize the central bank is controlling all of this. They realize that all of this is going to be right at their front door. And most of the countries are saying, we don't want this. Europe, if war breaks out, it's going to be at their front door. They're going to be the first to get hit. Now, NATO, they have activated their ballistic missile defense, BMD system, in Europe, which was officially inaugurated in Romania on December 18th. The facility will significantly increase NATO's BMD capability and defense coverage of the southern and central area of Europe against short and medium-range ballistic threats. The main military component of the Aegis Ashore anti-missile defense facility in Romania, a key element of the second stage of the European Phased Adaptive Approach, EPAA, had been completed and transferred to the operational commander for the future integration into NATO. So everything is live and ready to go. Out in Yemen, the ceasefire agreement completely falling apart. Fighting raged on Sunday between Yemen's warring factions on the final day of the UN-backed peace talks. There's no major breakthroughs whatsoever. They have received no results from the talks. This is coming from Hadi's government, which is the puppet government. Of course, their results are, yes, put me back into power, throughout the other people. And what we see right now is that they're going to extend the ceasefire, but the Houthis are saying, well, we can extend it, but Saudi Arabia has never stopped bombing us. They've never stopped firing us, even though the ceasefire was put into place. And it looks like at this point, this is what happened last time. They had a ceasefire agreement, and Saudi Arabia continually bombed. And of course, John Kerry was out there saying, ooh, the Houthis have to stop this. They have to lay down their weapons. They have to stop firing. Meanwhile, Saudi Arabia was continually bombing the Houthis. So if they're bombing the Houthis are not going to stop firing. So this whole ceasefire is kind of a waste of time. And we saw this before, and it's repeating itself. Because all they want is the Houthis to say, okay, the puppet government can come back in and they can control the country. That's what they want. And they will not stop until they get that. Now, Iraq has been calling on all their civilians to leave Ramadi within 72 hours. They've dropped leaflets. They've shown the civilians different ways they can get out of the area, because they're saying in 72 hours they're going to push a major offensive in this area. Now, the Islamic State, which we know is the proxy army for the United States government, we know the U.S. was in there protecting the Islamic State in Ramadi. This time around, the Iraqi government said, no. We don't want U.S. troops here. We don't want your weapons. We will take care of this ourselves, because last time you protected the Islamic State and you made it very difficult for us to go after them. So now the Islamic State, which is the proxy army for the United States government, central bankers, they're using the civilians who are trying to flee from Ramadi as human shields. So there is intelligence information from inside the city that the Islamic State are preventing families from leaving, because they're trying to keep this post. I'm sure the U.S. said, do whatever you possibly can to stay there. And remember, The United States government central bankers, they don't care about the people. They never have. And when the U.S. government wants to overthrow a government, yes, they're behind the people. Democracy, freedom. You should be listening to the people. They're behind the people because they're pushing the color revolution. We saw it in Ukraine. We saw it in Libya, Yemen, Iraq. We saw it in Syria. Once the puppet government is in place, they turn around and they call those people who oppose the new government terrorists, Al-Qaeda. They don't stand behind the people anymore because they're on the opposite side. And they fight against those people who try to remove the puppet government. And this is what we're seeing today. They use terrorism, terrorist forces, to get what they need. And they don't care about the people or the other forces as long as they get their way. Now, out in Libya, we realize that the UN, the United States, the coalition forces created this illusion of a unity governance in Libya. Now, a lot of the factions there did not agree with this whatsoever. They threw it out. And at this point, we see certain things occurring in Libya. First of all, the Western officials are scrambling to get authorization for a Libya airstrike in the coming days, on the phony pretext of ISIS all over Libya, trying to capture the oil fields moving inland. And the other thing that we are seeing right now, as soon as this peace deal was signed, the National Oil Corp, affiliated with the internationally recognized government, the puppet government in eastern Libya, said it will sign agreements with 6 companies to sell the country's crude oil after the peace deal. Now, they're signing the deal. Now, we have to remember that the oil, it's going to be sold out of Haringa port. And they moved the central bank to Beda. Hopefully I'm pronouncing these names correctly. And this is in the eastern part of Libya. The elected government is in Tripoli. So the port and the central bank are near each other, and they're no longer in Tripoli. And the National Oil Corp is saying, listen, if any other party now tries to export crude or products from Libya without its permission, there's going to be problems. So that means the elected government in Tripoli no longer can export the oil. They have switched it because of this peace deal, that now under this unified government, only the puppet government and the National Oil Corp has the right to sell oil out of this new port and to use the central bank that they moved out of Tripoli. This was all done on purpose. This was planned from the beginning because, like I said, this is part of their plan. The government in Tripoli, the elected government, was selling the oil not using the dollar. This was a problem. Now, under this deal, they have the ability to sell the oil. They made it like legal under their illusionary world. And now they're trying to call in Western forces to go after the Islamic State, which they're really not going after. They'll be going after the elected government and any other people that oppose the new unified government. That is what their plan is right now, and we will be seeing an invasion in Libya coming very soon. Now, Ashton Carter is basically planning to expand U.S. military presence across the globe. Right now, the U.S. is currently engaged in 5 wars: Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, Libya, Yemen, and forces are involved in lesser conflicts in Africa, Middle East, and Southeast Asia. A plan announced by the Pentagon in mid-December would greatly increase the number of overseas bases in order to maintain a more permanent U.S. military presence across Africa and the Middle East. Ashton Carter explained the plan in a little publicized speech in Washington. He said that these regional nodes in Spain and Afghanistan and many other areas will provide forward presence to respond to a range of crisis, terrorist, and other kinds. Now, what are other kind of crisis that he's talking about? Most likely, he's talking about Russia, and this is the real reason why they're spreading this all across and preparing for the next war. Now, Human Rights Watchdog is reporting that Moscow and Damascus is using cluster munitions. They're trying to push this forward to convince the world that Russia is using a banned weapon, an internationally banned weapon. By the way, the United States and Saudi Arabia is using these cluster munitions in Yemen. So Russia came out and said, okay, we are completely following and are in strict compliance with the principles and norms of international law, including all parts of international law that regulate the use, non-use, or prohibition of one or another type of weaponry, and no one should have any doubts about this. Basically what they're saying, show us proof that we are using this. We have proof that, yes, Saudi Arabia and the United States have been using it in Yemen, and Russia once again comes out and calling them out on it, saying, show us the evidence. Don't just tell us. You need to provide proof. And guess what? No proof. The Obama administration right now is blocking the Washington Times from obtaining detailed information about Syria's chemical weapon arsenal. They're saying they're asking for these documents, and the administration is slow or lack of any type of response to the Freedom of Information Act requests. They don't want to release this information because Syria was not using the chemical weapons. Syria was completely framed by Turkey. It was a false flag. The Free Syrian Army was using the sarin gas. It was found in their caves. Actually, MIT did a little experiment, and the missile that was used, they did the trajectory of where it was launched and where it landed, and they said it was completely impossible that the forces in Syria used this. Actually, if you looked at it, it came from the Free Syrian Army location. And during that time, Assad and Putin invited the UN Security Council in to investigate a different chemical weapon attack. And it just so happened that Assad wanted to use chemical weapons when he invited them into the country at the same exact time. It makes no sense. And this is why Obama doesn't want to hand over the Syrian chemical weapons documentation, because basically it will show that, yes, the United States knew about this and they were part of this plan. Now, we understand that the U.S. is pushing forward this peace deal with Syria and Russia. And the only reason they're going ahead with this is because they have something planned. They have switched tactics. They realize at this point that the method they were using with the Islamic State is not working. So now they have to switch it up, because right now Russia basically implemented a no-fly zone over the country. They're destroying their proxy army. Right now the United States, Qatar, Turkey has been airlifting the Islamic State out of the country. Turkey was then shown that they were the ones who were basically buying the oil, smuggling the oil out of Syria and Iraq and selling it to many different areas. Norway also did an investigation and proved it. Their whole entire tactic of using terrorism is completely falling apart. So what they need to do is they need to regroup, and this is exactly what they're doing. They're getting ready for a different plan, and this one is going to be much more horrific, because they need to convince the world that Assad must leave. They're not going to abide by this peace plan where he gets another 18 months there, then the people will decide, because they know what's going to happen. They know the people will elect Assad, because once Russia and Assad remove the terrorists from the country and liberate all the areas of Syria, why wouldn't they vote for him? So they know they cannot let this happen. So they are planning on a completely different event. Now, what will this be? Well, we know they're completely creating this ground force with Saudi Arabia, trying to get a lot of the coalition forces together to bring in specialized ground forces to go into Syria. We might even see a false flag, maybe in Europe, maybe here in the United States, maybe out in Canada or Australia, to say that Assad did this. But of course, the question will be, why? Why would he do this if he's winning against the Islamic State? Russia's helping him. It would make no sense. But that's not going to stop the United States. Whatever they're planning, it will need to convince the entire world this is the reason we need to go after Assad. Because they will never let the elections go through. It would be a complete disaster for the United States. And they're not going to change their goal. They spent a lot of time, a lot of money, and they need to get this country for the pipeline, to put the dollar on oil, and to set up a central bank, and then eventually go into Iran. They need to do this. So right now, we're seeing the Islamic State. They are now showing up in the Philippines. ISIS released a new video showing jihad training camps in the Philippines. And they are basically letting the world know that they're in Libya, that they've created this new Islamic police force. I mean, how ridiculous are we getting here already? And they're showing that they're patrolling the streets of Sirte, and they're saying that, yes, we control all of this area. They're making the case of why the Western forces need to go into Libya at this point. This is what they've been doing. They did it in Syria. They did it in Iraq. They're following the same exact tactic in Libya. Now, what's very interesting, out in the UK, they have removed 22 of the 43 units that respond to dirty bomb attacks. And why are they doing this at this point? If they're continually telling us terrorism, 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 and they need to protect the country, why would they remove half of the forces that would respond to a dirty bomb? Well, this kind of tells us something, that something is in the works, something might be planned, and this might be the area where they set something off, where they say they have to go into Syria. We need to watch what is happening right now in the world, because the US government, the UK government, the European governments, the central bankers that are all intertwined in this, they're pushing their agenda forward. They're getting ready for this major, horrific false flag event. Because as the economy collapses and things accelerate in the new year, they have no choice. They have no choice at this point but to do something. And this is what we need to watch out for, because they're going to push this so hard to start the next war. They have to, because if this system collapses without them starting this war or having this event, the entire world will blame the central bankers. And they don't want this to happen. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.